So in this video, James White is doing a debate with D.A. Waite, which was about 12 years ago. Around this time frame of 38 minutes to the 40-minute mark, in this debate, James White asks D.A. Waite this paragraph of questions, or question rather, that I'm going to address in this video. Here's the clip, and listen very carefully to what James White says. After you hear the clip, I will be refuting what he says in narration of notes. It's very easy to refute James White once again. He used circular arguments with the same blunders that he's accusing King James onlyists of doing.
And so I again have to ask, let me give you an example. Maybe it'll help if I have an example for us to look at. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 19, we have a passage where we have a quotation from two quotations from the Old Testament. The King James says, "Nevertheless, the foundation of God standeth sure, having this seal: The Lord knoweth them that are his, and let everyone that nameth the name of Christ depart from iniquity." Now, maybe you know otherwise, sir, but to my knowledge, I have not been able to find a single Greek manuscript that says Christ in this passage. The majority text reads Lord. All of the Nestle UBS reads Lord. All the unseals, all the minuscules, all the lectionaries, they all read Lord at this place and not Christ. And so maybe this will help us to get the question more clearly. Why should I believe that the correct reading here should be Christ, when to my knowledge no Christian prior to 1516 had ever seen the reading Christ here? Everyone had thought it said Lord. You just said, if you reject the received text, and you're saying the church didn't have a Bible until the 19th century, why should I accept the TR's reading at this point against all the Greek manuscripts?
To my knowledge, I have not been able to find a single Greek manuscript that says Christ. Just because he hasn't found one, doesn't make his assertion true. Source: 5,800 Greek manuscripts. A manuscript is a handwritten document. The word has its origin in Latin, manu, hand, and scriptum, written. There are approximately 5,800 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. In addition, there are 10,000 Latin manuscripts, and 9,300 manuscripts in other languages. Questions. How many of those 5,800 Greek manuscripts contain 2 Timothy 2:19? Has James White observed all 5,800 Greek manuscripts to verify which ones contain that passage? Is there any evidence of people who has counted all 5,800 manuscripts to documents which ones contain that passage? It's interesting that he makes this claim according to his knowledge, but he doesn't provide any evidence of people who has looked into all the manuscripts, which I doubt anybody has, but just in case if somebody claimed to have done that. Next statement to refute. The majority texts read Lord. All of the Nestle UBS says Lord, all the uncials, all the minuscules, all the lectionaries, they all read Lord at this place and not Christ. Webster's 1828. Unseal. Pertaining to letters of a large size, used in ancient manuscripts. Unseal. An unseal letter. Google search. There are more than 500 surviving unseal manuscripts. Unseal was a special script used for important texts, such as Christian books, and was still in use until around the 10th century outside of Ireland. The insular variant of unseal was the standard script for writing the Irish language until the middle of the 20th century. The four great unseal codices are the only remaining unseal codices that contain the entire Bible in Greek: Codex Vaticanus, located in the Vatican Library; Codex Sinaiticus, located in the British Library; Codex Alexandrinus, located in the British Library; Codex Ephraemi Rescriptus, located in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris. Has he looked at all 500 surviving unseal manuscripts? Has he read thoroughly the four great unseal codices? If he hasn't, then he's going off of second, third, fourth, or fifth-hand information. Minuscules. Google search. As of 2013, there were 2,926 catalogued Greek New Testament minuscule manuscripts. The total number of all Greek New Testament manuscripts was 5,838, which also included 128 papyri, 322 majuscules, and 2,462 lectionaries. The cataloguing of all known Greek New Testament manuscripts is a large and ongoing project. Since 2019, 167 new Gregory Allen numbers have been added, including 81 minuscules. Minuscule manuscripts are written on parchment or animal skin using a cursive style of writing with smaller letters that take up less space and time. They started to be used in the 9th and 10th centuries. Has he looked thoroughly through all 2,926 catalogued minuscule manuscripts? If he hasn't, then he's going off of other information he has not directly observed. Lectionaries. Webster's 1828. Lectionary. The Romish service book, containing portions of Scripture. Google search. There are many lectionaries in the Bible, including the 3-year series, the 1-year lectionary, and the daily lectionary, 3-year series, the most common lectionary, which is divided into 3 years, A, B, and C. Each year focuses on a different gospel, year A on Matthew, year B on Mark and parts of John, and year C on Luke. 1-year lectionary, a historic lectionary that repeats key biblical texts every year. Daily lectionary, a lectionary that provides more material than the Revised Common Lectionary, RCL. The Roman Catholic Church devised the daily lectionary, and the Church of England adopted it. The lectionary is organized into 2 cycles, one for Sundays and one for weekdays. The Sunday cycle is divided into 3 years, labeled A, B, and C. The lectionary is used by different churches, including Roman Catholics, use the lectionary consistently. Episcopalians use the lectionary almost always. Methodists and Presbyterians often use the lectionary. Baptists rarely use the lectionary, as they believe it discourages inspiration and imagination. Has he looked into every lectionary regarding this passage? If so, why should they be the authority on what Scripture says? The funny thing about James White is he says all of these things say, Lord, and do not say Christ, yet he probably has not looked through all of the exhausting sources himself. He's most likely going off second-hand information he got from somebody else, who probably got it from somebody else too. I dare anyone to provide any documentation of somebody who has looked through these thousands of exhausting sources of so-called evidence to prove that the biblical text in 2 Timothy 2:19 should read, Lord, and not Christ. Unless you can say this actually from your own direct observation and study, then admit that according to sources, they say this. But don't say it like it's a fact. Next statement to refute. Why should I believe that the correct reading should be Christ, when to my knowledge, no Christian prior to 1516 had ever seen the reading Christ here, everyone had thought it read Lord. Why should I accept the TR's reading at this point against all the Greek manuscripts? He's doing more storytelling, just like he does in his opinionated book, The King James Only Controversy. I've read it twice and he does a lot of storytelling in that book. He says, no Christian prior to 1516 had ever seen the reading Christ here, everyone had thought it read Lord. Really? Has he met everyone? Has he met every Christian before 1516? Is there any documented evidence that no Christian ever saw it read Christ and instead it read, Lord? All the Greek manuscripts? Have you looked at all 5,800 Greek manuscripts, James? Do you know how many Greek manuscripts contain 2 Timothy 2:19? You did not state any of this. So there's no reason for us to take you seriously at all. And even if they all said Lord and not Christ, how do you know those are the correct readings? Just because you find a manuscript in the sand somewhere, doesn't make it accurate. And no, you cannot date a manuscript factually to a certain time without a date written at the top. And even if there was a date written at the top or somewhere on the manuscript, that doesn't make it correct. He claims that King James only people are making a lot of assertions, when he's doing the exact same thing about his conclusions that in this case, 2 Timothy 2:19 should read Lord and not Christ. Part 2. The Greek text's evidence. 2 Timothy 2:19 Nevertheless the foundation of God standeth sure, having this seal, the Lord knoweth them that are his. And, let every one that nameth the name of Christ depart from iniquity. Now obviously this Greek translation is not exact to any of these Greek texts because the KJV was not directly translated from a single Greek text, a single manuscript, or even a single other English translation. It was a mixture of multiple sources, Hebrew/Greek texts, English translations, etc. from this source. These are the main source Greek text readings regarding 2 Timothy 2:19 and I provided the English translations. Berean Greek New Testament 2016. The solid foundation of God was erected, with this seal knowing the Lord of him, and I stand by the righteousness of the name of the Lord. SBL Greek New Testament 2010. The solid foundation of God has been erected, with this seal, know the Lord of this, and I stand by the righteousness of the name of the Lord. Nestle Greek New Testament 1904. The solid foundation of God has been established, with this seal of this knowing Lord of him, and I stand in the righteousness of the name of the Lord. Westcott and Hort 1881. The solid foundation of God has been established, with this seal of this knowing Lord of him, and I stand in the righteousness of the name of the Lord. Westcott and Hort. The solid foundation of God has been established, with this seal of this knowing Lord of him, and I stand in the righteousness of the name of the Lord. Westcott and Hort. The solid foundation of God has been established, with this seal of this knowing Lord of him, and I stand in the righteousness of the name of the Lord. RP Byzantine Majority Text 2005. The solid foundation of God has been established, having this seal, knowing master of this, and standing from the righteousness of the name of the Lord. Greek Orthodox Church 1904. The solid foundation of God was erected, having this seal, know the Lord of this, and I stand by the righteousness of the name of the Lord. Tischendorf 8th edition 1872. The solid foundation of God has been erected, with this seal, I know the Lord of him, and I stand by the righteousness of the name of the Lord. Scrivener's Textus Receptus 1894. The solid foundation of God has been established, having this seal, the knowing Lord of him, and I stand from the righteousness of the name of Christ. What manuscripts was Scrivener looking at? Could he possibly had access to manuscripts that were before 1516 that James White asserts was the first time that the text read Christ? Stephanus Textus Receptus 1550. The solid foundation of God stood with this seal, know the Lord of him and stand by the righteousness of the name of Christ. That's only 34 years difference from 1516. What manuscripts was Stephanus looking at that read Christ? Or what convinced him to record it as Christ? These are things James White does not think about. These are Greek New Testament 1598. But the solid foundation of God has been, having this seal, the knowing Lord of him, and I stand by the righteousness of those who name the name of Christ. That's 82 years difference from 1516. What manuscripts was Beza looking at that read Christ? Or what convinced him to record it as Christ? What about the Greek New Testaments from Elzevir, Erasmus, Polyglot, etc.? Also James White is a hypocrite because he wants to hold up the Nestle Aland Greek New Testament 28th edition with many textual variants and rely on that. But then he wants to pick on this technical textual variant between the KJV and other manuscript scripture sources. Google search. How many variants are in the Greek New Testament? We suggest that a reasonable estimate for the number of textual variants in the Greek New Testament, not including spelling differences, is about 500,000. A proposed estimate, its accompanying textual apparatus, which was based on nearly 100 Greek manuscripts. Eberhard Nestle estimated this number in 1897 as 150,000 to 200,000. James White does not provide any of this information. So why should anybody take him seriously just because he wrote a book entitled The King James Only Controversy, which I have read twice? Mr. James White made some bad mistakes in making wrong conclusions and assertions. 1. He assumes that according to his own understanding and knowledge, there's not one single Greek manuscript that says Christ. Correction, there is by looking at the Greek New Testaments made by Scrivener, Stephanus, and Beza, and possibly others. 2. He asserts, most likely by going by second-hand information, that all of the uncials, minuscules, lectionaries, read Lord instead of Christ. Correction, he's wrong because he hasn't looked at every one of those sources individually to come to that conclusion. If he has, I want to see documentation to prove it. 3. He asserts that nobody ever saw the word Christ in the text before 1516. Correction, he doesn't have a time machine or any specific documentation of witnesses at that time before 1516 to verify his claim. James White is a hypocrite. He commits the exact same fallacies that he accuses King James Bible-only people of doing.